Impikan untuk menjadi juara badminton seterusnya? Sertai badminton Astro dan berlatih dengan jurulatih terkemuka di Malaysia. Terbuka kepada lelaki dan perempuan berumur 10 hingga 12 tahun. Daftar secara dalam talian dengan akaun Astro anda dan hadiri mana-mana 5 kem pemilihan kami di seluruh Malaysia. Mereka yang terpilih akan berlatih dengan jurulatih profesional di Kuala Lumpur. Daftar di laman web kami hari ini dan tonton di Astro Arena.
Reintroduction of the GST is not a done deal, and the impact of its implementation is still being studied.
Yeah, because what happened was there were pieces of legislation that were introduced to implement the GST.
The short-term solutions will not hold for long. What do you think can be done by government in the short term to help mitigate some of the impact that we're seeing with the surge in food prices, particularly?
To consider options which are serious options for the present period.
Days. Sewa dan stream on demand atau sila ke saluran 480.
Hampir 30% berat badan kita itu adalah sampah yang dalam usus. Perut ente sampah semua ya.
Bersama pakar perubatan.
Kita rutin melakukan pembersihan usus, itu bisa menurunkan berat badan. Itu yang pertama.
Ketahui cara rawatan moden dan alternatif.
Ikhtiar wajib, tawakal juga harus.
Berkongsi pengalaman menarik.
Siapa yang mau sehat?
Sejadah di Astro Rania dan On Demand.
Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. In a recent announcement, the government said it would address food security by getting directly involved in both the production as well as the pricing of some essential food items. Now, government agencies and GLCs will be enlisted to grow grain corn and to control the chicken breeding industry ecosystem, from supplying chicks, chicken feed, transportation, and marketing. But can these ambitious targets be realized through direct government intervention? Joining us on the show is Professor Dr. Shaufiq Fahmi Siddiq. He is a Professor of Agricultural Economics at University Putra Malaysia and Director of the university's Institute of Plantation Studies. Professor Shaufiq, what do you think about the government getting directly involved in the chicken breeding industry? Do you think this is a good move?
Well, I think to encourage producers at this point in time by providing subsidies to make sure that they are in business, I think that is a good idea. Having a government department produce chicken is probably not the best idea. Is that if what is you are saying, which I think is not true. But as we know right now, poultry industry is an industry that is self-sufficient in this country. But recently, I think all of us know that there was a spike in the cost of production, and it's difficult for the producers to maintain low prices. And the government is, the government wants to make sure that poultry or chicken is being supplied at prices affordable to everyone. This is the most important source of protein in this country. We consume close to 50 kilograms of chicken annually per person.
Right.
So
Prof. Shaufiq, may I just clarify? So as you understand it, the government is not getting involved in the chicken farming, breeding industry, only the growing of corn for chicken feed. Is that what do you understand to be how the government is going to be involved?
Yeah.
Can you clarify?
Okay, if you are referring to producing corn, yes, that's what I also understand. To kickstart the project, I think the government is going to start through NAFAS, if I was not mistaken. Well, there are several considerations that we have to look at. We have to make sure that we produce at least 6 tons per hectare to be profitable. Now you have to understand, grain corn producers like America produces around 10 tons per hectare, and our next door neighbor Indonesia, I think they average out around 5 to 6. So if we want to make sure that we produce corn at reasonable prices, then we have to reach that level of production. And
yeah, Shafiq, sorry, if I can just jump in there, because I'm looking at the press statement from the Prime Minister's office, and it actually says there that NAFAS is going to take control of 20% of the market, and it's going to produce 144 million chickens a year, whereas Angkasa is going to produce 30 million chickens a year. I mean, that clearly means they're going to get involved. These two agencies are going to get involved in chicken farming.
Well, through small farmers, I suppose, not they themselves producing. And if you get the smallholders to produce, I think that's fine. They help organize production. I think that should be okay. This is how the industry has been working anyhow. Okay, you have all the big players, and we have small contract farmers. This is. I mean, if they are perpetuating that, I think that should be okay.
What has the government been doing in this past few weeks that indicates to you they've got a handle on the problem? Right now, they've announced they're going to be introducing a moving ceiling price as opposed to a fixed ceiling price. What has been done in the past few weeks that perhaps signals to you they have a handle on this, that they are perhaps looking at ways to ensure that we've got some measure of food security, particularly within essential food items like chicken, as you said, one of the most important sources of protein for the country?
Okay, we understand why ceiling price is there, to make sure that prices are low, and to keep ceiling price too low is also not possible when the cost of production is high. So to tie it up with commodity prices, I think is the right thing to do. They should have done that a long time ago. And it's never too late to start, I guess. I strongly support the move.
Okay, well, let's talk about never too late to start. I mean, it does seem to be the story of governance in the country. But, okay, we're going to better now than never, I think seems to be the motto. But what will it take to ramp up production? Growing corn, here we have what is identified as tobacco growing areas. They're going to change that to corn. What would it take, and what kind of timelines are we looking at for the growing of corn and for retraining people and so on and so forth over this, 11,000 hectares that they claim they have identified?
Okay, let me first of all put a caveat here. I'm not an agronomist. I'm an agricultural economist, but I do understand that corn production requires certain type of weather. You need dry weather, so I think we have to do it in the northern area, because humidity will introduce, bacteria, mycotoxin, for example. So that will not be good. The quality will have an impact on the quality. Will have an impact on poultry. So it has to be done right to begin with. I am an advocate of trade, so I always prefer, producing something that we're good at and buying something that we're not good at. That is how we were able to keep our prices competitive all this while. But if you want to have a sense of sovereignty, for example, then a bit, a sense of security, then you think by producing your own grain corn, you might be more secure. It's too early to say anything. There are many parameters to fulfill. If you start your corn production and if you don't produce the required yield, it's not going to provide any security. It's going to be very expensive for us.
A few weeks ago, we spoke to Professor Jomo, who mentioned that the way Malaysia has approached our food production has been to prioritize plantations that are non-food growing non-fruit growing plantations. And I'm just wondering, as an agricultural economist, how quickly can we make that shift? So we're not just growing the palm oil and the rubber, and we are in fact looking at ways to increase our food production, to increase our food security, particularly in that respect.
Now let's take a step back. For us to be food secure, producing everything that we consume doesn't guarantee food security. It guarantees availability. It gives you some sense of, security, maybe in terms of sovereignty, but it doesn't guarantee food security in a lot of sense. You might produce, but at very high prices, then it's not going to contribute towards food security. And you have to understand the plantation sector is a sector that has driven the Malaysian economy. Jomo, of all the people, I think, understand that very well. So, but of course, there are issues surrounding the plantation sector that we also need to address. And since we are using almost 90% of our land on oil palm, maybe this is a good time to start thinking of diversifying. And if you go back to history, we actually diversified away from rubber into oil palm, and ironically, we are now putting almost all our eggs in one basket by using almost all of our agricultural land on oil palm. So
Shafiq, I want if you can help us understand the way policymakers have approached the question of food and food production in this country. I mean, you brought up a very important principle that if we're not going to do, we're going to produce something in a cost-effective way, it's better to buy things. But there seems to be a rather critical asymmetry between imports and domestic production, and we seem to have tipped the balance into being a net importer at almost a critical level. Is that something that we can change? I mean, are there small steps that government can take in order to bring us into a much more balanced situation?
Well, yeah, by increasing efficiency, that is what we need to do. I think we need to understand that for us to increase production, we need to look at efficiency. We have to make sure that we use our resources properly. Being efficient is when we get the most out of our inputs. And the way to achieve that is through employing the right technology, smart agriculture, for example. Now, if we think that by producing our own corn is going to solve the problem of chicken feed, then we might be mistaken, because we still need to import fertilizer, and we can only produce nitrogen because we have natural gas, but we still have to import muriate of potash. We still have to import, phosphorus and potassium, because we don't have those in Malaysia. So, see, Malaysia cannot be an autarky. Malaysia is a small trading nation. We will always have to trade, and we have to be very careful with the choices that we make. Having a knee-jerk reaction is always not a good thing. See, right now corn prices are high. We think that if we produce our corn, we can produce at a profit. But what if the prices go down later? I'm not saying that we shouldn't go into corn production. What I'm saying here is we have to be very careful in what we do. If we want to do it, we make sure that we do it right. If we can get the right yield, yes, by all means, go ahead. But to produce just for the sake of producing and giving us this false sense of sovereignty or security, then it's going to cost the country a lot of money.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight. Professor Shafiq Siddiq from UPM's Institute of Plantation Studies there. We're going to take a quick break here and consider this. We will be back with more on this topic. Stay tuned.
Walau dalam kesibukan seharian, pasti ada ruang untuk membuat kebaikan. tekadkan hati untuk saling tolong-menolong dan bertolak ansur sesama kita. Dengan memudahkan urusan orang lain, kita memberi sinar buat hari mereka. Kerana hidup ini sebenarnya mudah. Di Easy Korban, kami memudahkan urusan korban dan akikah anda. Easy Korban, mudah dan dipercayai.
COVID-19 memperlihatkan kepada kita betapa pantasnya adaptasi teknologi di kalangan PKS kita. Niaga AWANI dan Unified Business akan menyelami perjalanan kebangkitan semula PKS kita melalui segmen Jiwa SME setiap Selasa dan Khamis untuk inspirasi anda.
Transformasikan perniagaan dengan Unified Business, rakan digital pilihan anda. Hubungi kami sekarang dan jimat sehingga 50%. Jom Unified Business.
Salam sejahtera, ini berita Astro. Bersedia untuk menari riang kerana rumah anda bakal bebas daripada zon Wi-Fi hilang dengan kehadiran Wi-Fi kencang Astro Fiber. Anda nak belajar di rumah, anda nak work from home atau bertiktok bergoyang di setiap ruang, zon Wi-Fi pasti tak hilang. Dengan hanya RM129 je sebulan, anda akan dapat 3 dalam 1, iaitu kelajuan 50 Mbps, router Wi-Fi 6 dan peranti mesh percuma. Ya, percuma. Dan pack primary Astro dengan 85 saluran. Inilah penjimatan paling kencang. Kunjungi astrofiber.com.my. Saya Nala Huda melaporkan untuk Wi-Fi kencang. Maaf, berita Astro. Saya kena lari untuk dapatkan Wi-Fi kencang sekarang.
Hi, thanks so much for staying with Sharad and I on Consider This. We're discussing the surge in food prices and what must be done now to address the issue. Joining us on the show is Dr. Sarina Cheomar. She's the Deputy Director of Research at Khazanah Research Institute, where she focuses on policies related to food, agriculture and sustainability. Dr. Sarina, we understand that the team at KRI went to meet with the Prime Minister's Office Economic Action Council earlier this week, and this to propose the flexible ceiling and subsidy prices. I'd like to understand a little bit better this proposal, the nuances of the proposal, particularly in how it compares to having fixed ceiling price.
Okay, Melissa, I mean, if I can give 3 key words for this, it is dynamic, it cuts down bureaucracy, and it manages expectations. So what do I mean by that? A moving price means it is very dynamic and it adjusts based on global or whatever you choose as your reference point. So in this case, just as an example, if you have the chicken industry, what we are impacted by, like say the maize prices, right? So we follow the maize prices, and at the front, we already say, okay, if maize prices go above 250 per USD per metric ton, the price is 9 ringgit, for example. If the price goes below 250, the price is this amount. And if it goes below 200, there's no price ceiling, right? So at the front, you already tell everyone that's what's going to happen. Now, that manages people's expectations, which is very, very important. Because you got to imagine, if you're a chicken producer, now, your chicken takes about 48 days to grow, right? You need 48 days in advance to start thinking about how many chickens to buy, how many chicken feed to collect, and you need to plan ahead. You can't have surprises coming in the next day. So when you have these moving prices and you set up at the front telling everyone with full transparency, if the prices go down, do expect ceiling might change. And when you do that, there's no surprises in the supply chain. And when there are no surprises, supply becomes more consistent. And what I mean by reducing bureaucracy, I'll give you guys an example, all right? Now, the chicken price ceiling was set in February, right, at 8 ringgit 90 cent. At that time, the maize price was at 292 USD per metric ton. So considering that price, doing all the calculations, or it was, decided to be at 8.90, and then to compensate the producers, we give them a subsidy of 60 cents per kilogram. That's assuming it's at 292. But guys, 2 months down the line, maize prices went up 19%, right? And you know what? Farmers had to wait to suffer. Then they had to find a place to complain. And then when they find a place to complain, they were hurt. When they were hurt, only then government need to find time to meet up and discuss about it. By the time all of that happened, the industry would have suffered. So we want to get rid of all of that. We want to be as transparent, as efficient as possible. So that's why KRI proposed this method. Now, just to clarify here, we didn't say the chicken industry must have a ceiling price, moving price, ceiling price. We said if you feel that you need a ceiling price, a moving ceiling price is a good strategy to adopt. There's also another strategy that we do say is a good strategy, which is a direct cash transfer. So you guys, if we have extra time during this interview, let's go back to direct cash transfer. But that it is about moving ceiling price.
Right, Sarina, could you help us understand what the consequences of the existing policies have been on food producers, chicken farmers in particular? We hear stories that chicken farmers are under extreme pressure, and that in fact some of them are going out of business. What do you understand is actually happening on the ground?
So, I mean, the best case scenario is that when you put the ceiling price at 8 ringgit 90, there is a compensation because, it is pretty, it's a hard number and people can't really make money out of it. But to compensate, the government said, we will give you 60-cent subsidy. It's just that in terms of the delivery of the subsidy, there were some issues, and some farmers, they had some timeline gaps, so they also didn't claim. Some didn't have licenses, so they can't even claim. There was some bureaucracy kind of issues. So, you couple everything together, it just became a little bit messy. And of course, with the ceiling price being like that, fixed, and then prices going up, people are getting tighter and tighter. What happened was that in order to, it's a business thing, right? People have to do business. So when the gap is too tight, something's got to give. So what some producers had to do was that they just had to use cheaper feed. And what happened when you use cheaper feed? Your chicken just didn't grow very fast. And what happened? When that happened, you have a supply issue, right? Because there's just not enough chicken at the right size to be sold. So, there are these effects happening. Now, I can't say the government is fully wrong. They're really trying to help. But, there are just challenges that we just need to adjust as we move. And that's why I'm very happy that the government decided they're open enough to explore a moving price, ceiling price as a way to continue on addressing this issue. Because, Sharat, food prices is not going to go down as long as the Ukraine crisis happen, as long as global fertilizer prices stay up, inflation is going to continue.
Can I follow up on that just very quickly? Are you expecting the food price trajectory to increase, or as some are calling a food crisis, a global food crisis? Are you expecting this to continue longer? I read an SMP report that cited that it could be years and not months as we are anticipating. What do you think, Sarina?
Melissa, I wish I have a crystal ball to tell you the answer. I don't, but I do know, like I say, if the global fertilizer prices continue to be high, particularly from China, with the coal prices being very high in China, if that continues, and if Ukraine and Russia crisis continues, then yes, global food price crisis is going to continue. And it didn't help that we're recovering from the pandemic. So, couple everything together, you get this really unsavory food that's happening, unsavory thing that's happening.
All right, I'll come back to the moving ceiling price that was proposed and adopted. Can I ask you what would ensure the effective, successful implementation of the ceiling price? You talked a little bit about transparency in knowing what the different prices are of the inputs along the supply chain. What might hinder this moving ceiling price from being effective for producers?
Well, I can say as much as I want, but I really hope it becomes as effective as possible. But one thing that needs to happen is that everyone got to huddle together, the industry players, the government, everyone got to huddle together and together agree on the price breakdown. So if the price is like this, I agree, ceiling price is like this is the best price. If it really goes down, we don't need subsidies anymore. And everyone should stick to that. And another thing, not to forget, not only we should stick to that, everyone agree to it and stick to it, but there should also be a timeline, Melissa. It can't be on forever. This is a short-term solution, so there must be a timeline, maybe like a 3 months or 4 months, and then so it's moving price until this date, whichever comes first, whether the price goes down first or you hit that timeline. So with that together and people working together, hopefully we can come to a successful outcome.
Right, Serena, so the focus in our conversation so far has been on the supply side. I mean, what about demand? We hear stories of, I've read stories of, Pakistan asking its citizens not to drink so much tea or reduce the number of cups of tea they drink. Is there a role to be played in terms of the way we now look at our nutrition, the way we deal with food waste? Are these parts, are these other constituent parts of the solution, as it were?
Well, one thing I never want to hear is us telling Malaysians to eat less chicken and eggs, because that's a very good source of protein and we should be very proud. In fact, by the way, Sharad, do you know that Malaysia regionally has one of the cheapest chicken? KRI, actually, my colleagues, we rank the prices of chicken and we convert everything, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, everything to ringgit, and we actually did pretty well. So chicken is a really good source of protein, and I hope we don't come to a point where we need to eat less of it. Wastage, of course, there's always that part where we shouldn't be wasting food. We should be more cautious about that. Yeah, I mean, of course.
Yeah. Serena, in the few minutes that we have left, I want to ask you about this direct cash transfer. So you said moving ceiling prices is one option, one policy intervention. Why would direct cash transfers be a good alternative?
Okay, so in theory, if we just look at it from bigger things, in the general things, is that blanket subsidies has always been an inefficient way to help the people, because when you do blanket subsidy, even the rich gets it. Multinational fast food chains enjoy these subsidies. People who don't need it enjoy it. When you do targeted, by right, you are targeting people who actually need it. But there's a big but. The big but here is that it is as good as the database of the people who needs it, right? So if we do not have a good capture of the B40, let's say, for example, then we're not effectively, providing that cash transfer to them. And another big but here is that, yes, we are doing direct cash transfer, but what about the invisible people, the migrant workers who are undocumented? They're going to be lost in this. They're going to fall through the cracks. So direct cash transfer is a really good solution, but we must make sure we tidy things up as we go along. So yes.
Was the government receptive to this proposal? What was the reaction when you made this proposal, Serena?
Which one? The moving price ceiling or
the direct cash transfer?
I think they were the ones who were thinking about it. So I just told them it's something to really think about, and it's a good idea. I think they were already planning for this.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us on the show, Dr. Serena Umar of Khazanah Research Institute, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kuttan, signing off for the evening.
Thank you so much for watching, and good night.
Welcome to Note Pad. I'm your host Ibrahim Sani. We continue our discussion with my most favorite sector, which is consumer. And of course, in this sense, we're talking about the F&B business. Very recently, Subway has announced the master franchise agreement that will unlock about 500 outlets in the next 10 years in Malaysia. Joining me in the studio right now is Samad Sharif, the country director of Southeast Asia of Subway. So Samad, it's always interesting to talk about some of the ideas when it comes to consumer business, but more so when it comes to businesses that is using, so to speak, an old-fashioned model, pardon me, but a tried and tested one. Old-fashioned doesn't mean it's bad. Old-fashioned also means it's tried and tested. In this sense, the master franchise agreement. Now, it is an ambitious goal to open 500 outlets in Malaysia over the next 10 years. Maybe we can start with the baseline. How many outlets do you have now?
Okay, currently we have about 280 restaurants. But the 500 restaurant is on top of the 280 that we're having now. So that's
about 700 soon.
Yes, correct. That's the plan.
And then, of course, you're looking at Southeast Asia. So how many markets are you looking at right now?
Okay, currently in Southeast Asia, we actually have 6 operating markets, including Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, of course, is one of it. Philippines, we are operating in Philippines as well. Right? Currently, Thailand has already converted to a master franchise. We're actually working on other countries as well.
Okay, sorry. Okay, this took me by surprise. So not all the markets have master franchise?
Not yet, because basically, Subway, we are a 50-year-old company, right? So there was an operating model before. This master franchise is an evolving model for us.
Okay.
Right? So in Southeast Asia currently, we actually have Indonesia, Thailand, and Malaysia that have converted to a master franchise.
And the rest of the markets is still single owner?
It's still, yes. It's what we call our business developer model.
Okay.
Where essentially every country is broken up into a couple of pieces, and then each piece is actually given to a different partner.
So it's like a district or region
something like that, yes.
Okay.
Something similar.
What would be some of the impetus that goes into this idea of whether a market goes into a master franchise versus I don't know what you call it, district business?
A business developer model.
Business developer.
Well, for us, we actually look at the opportunity of growth for the market itself. For example, like Malaysia, for the past 20 years, it sounds big. We are actually at, like I said, 280 restaurants, but 280 restaurants within 20 years means it's only about 20 restaurants a year. Right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so for us, being on our multi-year transformational program, both working on our products, development, service, experience, and all that, store growth is actually important for us, right? So Malaysia was actually chosen just for that purpose, right? Basically, based on our internal analysis, we found that there's a lot of white spaces in Malaysia itself that can give us that 500 stores or beyond 500 stores.
Okay, we're going to go into the white spaces per se, but before we jump to that, let's talk a little bit more into the sales and the contribution of the markets that you're overlooking. Where do Malaysia stand in terms of the 6 markets that you're looking at?
Okay, at this point in time, Malaysia is actually second to Singapore.
Oh, okay.
Right? And the best thing, I would say the best thing about Malaysia is even during the pandemic, and for us internally, the year 2020 and 2021 was a year that we sort of like used it as a test bed of what will happen in the future, right? So when we actually compare our sales, we found that Malaysia, compared against pre-pandemic, has actually gone up almost 40%, right, against 2019, right? So that shows us that there's tremendous growth, and that's where we actually then wanted to convert to a master franchise as soon as we could.
What would be the contributing factor to that jump of 40%?
I think mainly it's changing of the model. I said we were actually on a multi-year remodeling scheme, right, where most of the restaurants look old, looks jaded. We have actually revisited them, changing them into what we call our fresh forward model. The fresh forward model is more inclined towards what we are, which is actually fresher food, right? More pastel colors, greener, more showcasing of what we offer, our food, right? So it actually gives the consumer a more fresher feeling when they actually walk into the restaurant.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the consumer branding and consumer outlook of the brand itself. I would tend to agree with you that some of the restaurants that you have is rather dated.
Dated is correct.
And the idea here is that everywhere I work, in all the organizations that I work, there tends to be a Subway downstairs. It's so bizarre, but that's the case. Except for here, because we're quite isolated.
Well, we can open one soon.
Yeah. But there is little to no change to the menu, little to no change to the hardware of the shop, little to no change to the way things are being done, served. Do you feel that there comes a time when, I don't know, do you guys do a brand audit or a brand, just to take a sense of what people think about the brand itself?
We do, to be honest. We actually do it on an annual basis, or even some country on a